Okay, we can start. Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is Frederick Donk. I'm working with the Internet Society, and I like to have a very open conversation with you on encryption. This is something that will be really one of our key priorities for the Internet Society in the next coming months and years. And you will hear me and my colleague talk a lot about encryption. But honestly, just not us. I mean, there is no one day when you cannot see in the press or somewhere that governments around the world try to minimize or challenge encryption for quote-unquote very good reason. So let's walk through this. I would like you to recognize when those things happen and why we should not let that do. I hope you can hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. But let's start to have a common understanding. What is encryption? So encryption, that is that process that scramble, that hide information so that there is one other person somewhere who can open this information with a special key and put that information back in its previous stage, the original state. That is encryption. And on the internet, end-to-end encryption, this is what offers the highest level of security, because that is really the encryption that is intended to reach out to one specific addressee who has the key, and no one else is supposed to have a key. Well, no one else in principle, because you will hear in a few minutes that there are brilliant minds out there who are actually trying to say that maybe governments might have a key as well to listen from time to time. So, do we use encryption on a daily basis? Yes, we all do, sometimes without even knowing. Encryption is useful to protect your communications when you have a relationship with your bank, when you speak with other people, when you got messages to some website, to your government, to your administrations. It is being used for electrical services, for gas services, for transport. So encryption is being used absolutely by everybody. In 2018, we calculate that there were 1.7 billion people using encryption on a daily basis. So that is really strong. So what's the issue? Well, the issue paradoxically is security. Well, encryption brings security, but government says that they should weaken encryption so that they can ensure people's security. So that's the whole story. Government is anxious that they cannot actually listen or see what some guys are doing. So they want to weaken encryption. And you will see that there are a lot of initiatives around the world, many different ideas, all of them trying to weaken encryption. So there is, of course, what we call the backdoor access, there is filtering, there is ghost users, and I will tell you what it is, root certificates, upfront access, and many others attempt to weaken encryption. But the main one that is being discussed those days that you will listen a lot is what is called lawful access or exceptional access. And honestly, it sounds very reasonable. Actually, when you talk with people, they say, yeah, indeed, look, governments, well, sorry, there are bad guys, terrorists who are using encryption to talk with each other, and because they use encryption, it's impossible to see or hear what they say. Or there are bad guys who use encryption to just store data on the web or somewhere, and again, it's impossible to find evidence of the crimes or even to prosecute them because of encryption, you cannot access those data. So indeed, it seems very reasonable to allow governments to access those data so that they can protect the life and of their citizens. And governments then ask us to trade a little bit of our privacy to allow for more security. Well, I wish it would be that simple. It's not that simple. Because as I said, encryption actually is security. Bringing encryption in communication brings security. Strong encryption helps prevent tampering with operation of critical services like electricity, transport, or nuclear power plants. Strong encryption keeps citizen data, such as your bank information, your health information, away from terrorists. Strong encryptions ensure that law enforcement, police, government, any authorities can talk between themselves, again, with in a protected way. But then people say, okay, but what if there would be only legitimate requests to get into the protect communications? But here again, as we all know, weakness in computer system is just adding a vulnerability. So if there is a weakness in an encryption, it means that also the bad guys can use those weaknesses. So I have absolutely no doubt that if we would offer governments in the world the capacity to go back into an encrypted message, terrorists will find the same way and go into it. And that would be just detrimental for the trust of people in the whole system. So as I said, people rely on secure and an encryption in their everyday life, and it's really helped preventing, well, bad acts, but also ensuring security. So let me give you some example, walk you through what happened the last 6 months actually, or the last 12 months, to just show you the different kind of angles and ways that government have tried to weaken encryption. The last one you might have heard is this letter from the UK, Australian and US government to Facebook. So they were asking formally Facebook to weaken their encryption on their servers because they want to have a capacity to know and see what people are saying on Facebook, especially, of course, the bad guys. And for the reason that I just explained, there were more than 50 civil societies around the world who signed a letter to Facebook saying, please do not weaken encryption. So let's see what's happened. The G7 of the governments also, you know, those 7 big governments in the world who meet regularly, they met recently in France, they also come up with ideas. Some of them is, of course, lawful access to encrypted messages, and the other one is filtering. And again, filtering might seem an interesting ability. It's just trying to find out what are the bad people saying and filter it so that the reasoning behind that was for government to combat hatred speech, extremist speech, etc. And let's be clear, there are no such filtering service that is able at this stage to make the difference between hated speech or propaganda or a news article that speak about hated speech or propaganda. It's impossible. We don't have artificial intelligence those days in humanity to make the difference. But even though, if we were having this, technically, to allow for filtering like this, you would need to implement what we call a hop-by-hop encryption. And that means that you don't challenge the encryption in the network, but you challenge the encryption when the data is in the hands of the operators. So it would allow actually governments to listen to every data, and that is mass surveillance when the data is in certain hop before it's again encrypted. So it's quite cynical for government to say, you should give me an overall license so that I can continue to survey everybody because of bad behavior of some. Another interesting initiative, this one was suggested from the British Government Communication Headquarters, the GCHQ. And they came up with an idea, it was even more interesting. They said, look, we have an idea, we don't want to break encryption. No way, you're right, you need to keep communication secure and continue to have a protected security. But what we would like to do is to inject what we call in our jargon a ghost user. And that would be, in this case, the ghost user would be the government. So let me explain what it is. So if you are familiar with public key cryptography, and let me explain what it is. In encryption, end-to-end encryption, every device generates 2 keys, one public key and one private key. And the public key is the key that is distributed to anybody, right? That is what makes sure that we can find you on the encrypted messages. The private key is something that you keep. Now, the problem here, as you might guess, is authentication. It means that your public key should actually direct to you. So if someone is able to fool the user and direct the message to another public key that is not you, encryption is just not useful. I mean, you might have encrypted your message, but your message will be in someone else's hand, so it means zero encryption. So, what happened those days for ease of use, when you use a WhatsApp message, a Telegram message, or a wire or a Signal, all those services that are encrypted, you have a public key, so you know that your WhatsApp message, for example, is end-to-end encrypted, right? So there is a public key that is stored on WhatsApp servers, and this is being distributed to anybody who wants to reach you. You have the private key. What the UK government suggested is you should, on WhatsApp, have a third key, and that is our key, government key, and you would inject another public key that we would be used to be able to listen to the conversation. So, whenever you are in a conversation with someone else on WhatsApp, actually you are on a chat. You don't know it, but you are on a chat, and there is a third person who actually can see and listen to what you say. So that was the suggestion of the UK government, saying we don't break encryption, we protect encryption, we're just adding another key, another public key. So I guess you will assess the validity and of this, and again, this is for us another way to lower trust and to put weakness in the system. Another attempt was recently also in July from the Kazakh government, when they asked and require users to install root certificates that belong to the government to whatever mail or activity on the internet. Actually, that is a very blatant way for a government to try to be the middleman in any conversation, actually. This is just the ability for them to intercept encrypted message, even in HTTPS, because there is a machine in the middle. So there again, while the Kazakh government were saying that it would be voluntary and that it would be just for security of people, we thought it's of course not very smart, and again, it's adding other vulnerability, and in this case, it's adding a blatant way for governments to spy on their people. So, there's a backdoors, there is, as I said, the ghost users, there's so many ways. The last one that I heard recently was an intervention from the NSA in the US. And they were saying that after thinking twice, they would not need backdoors, they need updoors. I mean, they need something that is just up front. They say, no, we need, I will try to read the line. They say, we want the front door. We want the front door with a lock, and we have the lock. So in other words, what they were asking is, no backdoors, okay, we understand you don't like it. We want every service offered by Facebook or Google or whatever to have another key up front so that the government share half the key with those big companies. So in other words, the government would have the ability to force Google or another one to just open so that they don't even have to intercept, they have the key to the encrypted message. I find that fantastic, if I may say, but honestly, again, it's another attempt from governments to weaken our right to privacy, but more importantly, to weaken the security of our messaging. And then recently too, the AIB, you know that I mentioned Internet Society, the IAB is our architect board in the IATF. So those guys give strategic direction. And they also came up with suggestion, or actually bad suggestion, saying that some government would be tempted to use other endpoints to try to crack encryption, like using BGP or others. I won't go into it, this is fairly technical. The reason why I wanted to talk to you about this is, I hope you understand that encryption is in itself security of our communication, just not our communication. Encryption allows services to run on the internet in a safe way, be it banking or electricity or other critical services. So any attempt to weaken encryption is actually also take the risk to endanger the security of citizens. So the argument that weakening encryption is actually something to protect security is a very wrong argument. So force weakness is weakens us all. That is something I need to repeat. If there is a lock somewhere that the good guys can open, it will be opened soon by bad guys as well. There is a risk on national security and on personal security. If you have a weakness or vulnerability in an encrypted message, you open the door to terrorists or bad guys to use your information using those data. If the fight is against terrorists and extremists, I believe that if terrorists and extremists know that government have access to encrypted service like WhatsApp, they won't use WhatsApp anymore anyway. So I don't see the point in trying to weaken this. So all what I say is be careful, open your eyes, because I believe that the fight against encryption from governments will happen in many countries in the world with the same simple excuse that it is something to balance terrorism or bad behavior on the internet. And as I just explained, I believe this is a wrong position. So we should not weaken encryption. Encryption is just not a technology. Encryption is a system that is key for cybersecurity. Thank you very much. And I would like to take any question you might have. Thank you. Sir, please tell your name and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Ruben, and
sorry, so we need a mic for the translator.
Hi, I'm I'm Ruben, and
Do you know what? Come here and talk. Is it me? Oh yeah, sorry, do it again.
Look, when governments are pushing the agenda of planting backdoors or planting implants or anything like this, these measures will be totally failed, because there are a lot of open source projects, and like Signal that is used for secure communication, and for example Vicar that is used for anonymous communication. We can create a lot of services using PGP or anything else. I mean, technology have risen up, and it is not possible to countermeasure those attempts. So my question is, what governments will do with those who will not comply with their requirements? Will they block the traffic? Will they implement DPI? Will they put some legislative measures on cloud vendors and put some blocks on servers? Your opinion, thank you.
I would like to share your optimism. You're right. There are technological and technical answers that are possible to those threats. And you're right. You mentioned Signal, which is has a very strong end-to-end encryption. Wire and other services have this. What we see, though, is that governments like the one I just mentioned for the time being, Australia, US, UK, it's quite important government, is it? Try to convince operators or convince regulators and other lawmakers to make access for some exceptional reason. So they're still pushing. And I hope they will still pushing in a transparent and open environment so that we know, because as you remember, there were surveillance where we didn't know actually. So I hope that democracy will operate in those governments so that we know whenever they try to push. I would love to share your optimism, but I believe that the means to intercept traffic are just not backdoors, as I mentioned. You can also fool BGP documentation. You can just try to go to so many different ways that I believe government may try to get into that. So I believe we need to be aware that there are attempts to do it. Yes, please.
I totally agree that we should be aware about it. But if you will look on the on the process of blocking Telegram in Russia, and they'll fail to do so for consecutive 16 months. I mean, look, technology have grown up. And when we talk, you have told wire, but I was talking wicker, W-I-C-K-R. This one is more sophisticated, and in line with technologies like domain fronting, in line with technologies like traffic mimicking, in line with technologies like I2P, not TOR, but I2P. It is an obvious failure for any governmental actor to try to intercept or to block those services. I mean, those services are unblockable by their essence. You may create something like Chinese firewall and cut the country out of the internet, but implementation of that DPI systems of that scale, like for example to put it in Australia, which has really big bandwidth, and to put that bandwidth through the DPI system will create additional cost. And those costs will be, I mean, it will be like bazillion of dollars. So what are the technical means for governments to try to block it? How do they plan to do it? Thank you.
Well, honestly, sorry? Okay, so I will try to answer too, but if you want to give a technical approach, I will be delighted to hear. I believe there are so many ways to get and create vulnerabilities, and I mentioned one of them, the hop-by-hop encryptions. Actually, at a certain moment, your encrypted message is in the hands of someone before getting back. So maybe governments, some of them might understand that when the message is in the network itself, you can just not miss with encryption, but there are some parts of the network that are unprotected where they want access. And I believe they have enough imagination to force some of those actors to offer access. Alexander, you want to add something?
Yeah, okay, I'm Alexander Samnin from Internet Protection Society from Russia, so I have great experience in what's going on in Russia. So answering your question in what government's going to do. This question exists only in European democratic Western kind of societies. Because looking on Russian government pretending to do this, actually they do not want to block completely. They just do want to state their right over the internet. And then they, for example, can prohibit you using several protocols like VPN protocols, and we going to China. But actually, well, in Armenia, in Russia, in Belgium, it's not possible. The next step, prohibiting usage of applications. But it's still not possible in Western kind of democracies. So it's just a kind of canary warning. If they start prohibiting usage of technologies, it's a really, really bad thing. Until that, they will do something like blocking Telegram. At last 16 months, at least 3 times, Roskomnadzor reported that they completely blocked all really degraded Telegram. They just can't do. And then we go slowly to question to you. Frederic, hi, now questions to you. Well, you mentioned governments and government actors during these things. And if we go backwards for history, it's like Clipper chips in the United States. They're trying to prohibit encryptions for years. From other hand, we see that Internet IETF, which is supported by Internet Society, successfully implemented TLS 1.3 with perfect forward secrecy, while governments via their representatives tries to inhibit this activity, saying something about enterprises. Also in ETF, I know there is public interest stage group now grows up. Also there is human rights considerations protocol study group, I think it's study group. So slowly, technical community understands that they need to go that way. Also, as we've seen in the opening session, the former Minister of Telecommunications of Sweden say, no, we are engineers, we are not political organizations. Maybe it's time to become real political organizations and have possibility to pressurize government specs. We are our own members. We are we are representatives existing like engineers. They're also citizens of some countries. So maybe for I-Star organizations, it's an idea to have more pressure on governments.
Excellent. So actually you want to continue the conversation that you start with Joran Marby this morning about the fact that ICANN would be a political organization. You should continue with him, hopefully. When the IETF 4 years ago declared that by default the protocols that they would produce should be with privacy by default, it might be a political statement. You might take it like this. In their head, it was a technical statement, but of course it has political consequences. So my vision of things is that everything in life, in everything you do, we are political animals, so whatever you do might have a political consequence, right? No, that is an overall answer. I believe that some organizations need and want to be seen as technical organization, part of the technical community, period, because this is where they have their credibility. So we not claim that we are activists in the political scene, we are techie, but indeed, when the IETF declare everything will be in privacy by default, it might be seen as a political statement, I agree. Anybody else? So if you just take as a takeaway from this kind of conversation that there still will be many attempts in your country and others to try to weaken your security by using again an argument that is we will add more security in weakening your security, then you are warned that there is something wrong going on. Any other question?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frederick. Thank you. And I guess everyone who wants to ask more questions, you can find Frederick in the background there. And he's still here for today and tomorrow, and you can use that chance. Thank you again. Thank you.
I want to call our next panel participants, and Yuri Khorsayan is going to be the moderator of that panel session, and he will introduce his keynote speakers himself. I invite Mr. Tigran Hakopian, Armen Muradian, Armen, and what was your second name? Onanyan, Armen Onanyan. Yeah, we have a lot of Armens here, whatever. Yev, I invite Anushavan Arushanyan. Sorry, not Anushavan. Ararat Arushanyan. I invite you to, please. We have no more session participants, and all of them are here. A couple of words before starting the debate. Well, as many of you most probably have been already might be familiar with our keynote speakers. Maybe no need to introduce them. You might have seen their names in the agenda. So let's start straightforward. The description of CISA. You know that since 2005 we have a commission regulating public services, which is providing electronic communication licenses and electronic communication usage licenses, and our operators are using these licenses, providing internet accessibility. As I said before, Armenian legislation doesn't stipulate any regulation with IP numbers, because IP numbers are provided by other organizations. So today, the networks simply receive these licenses and act as required by the law, providing internet availability, accessibility. But we have an older law, which is the law on radio and television broadcasting, which was regulating radio and television, and also the cable networks. Today, in the result of the development of technologies, a cable network, which used to be before, does not exist at all. The cable network was differing from it was an electronic communication network, but it was one-sided, meaning there were switchboards, and we were just turning it and seeing the application. And today, practically, these networks do not exist. All video, audio broadcasts go through electronic communication networks, and the operators of electronic communication allow you to get in touch with any server placed anywhere in the world where there is any video content. However, if the server is situated in Armenia and in the network of the given operator, these operators are either historically or by request come to the Commission of TV and Radio Commission a permit for working on cable networks. So there is just one contradiction. One is. Second, in 2017, we passed to digital TV broadcasting, and with that, the TV program and frequency connection was broken. Before the frequency was given to the TV program, they would call it 5th channel, 10th channel, whatever, and that channel and that content, and at that point was that was creating a content, of course, temporarily for some 10 days, was the property of those who are creating this content. Today, no frequency is given to TV content creator. Today, this frequency belongs to the RC of the Republic of Armenia, which is a close company and is state company. The tower, belongs to it, and instead of one channel, you can just place 10 TV programs in one. So that is to say, we do not provide frequency, but we provide access to this multiplex. And that was the second point, which needs attention and needs corresponding changes in the law. And the concepts, terms. We have such a concept which we call broadcasting, which is, of course, from the point of view of content, is to this broadcast action is to coincide with the concept broadcast, which is you broadcast from some point to a big number of people. But what we see is not a broadcast as such. So it would be better if we use in the law those terms and concepts which are developed by the International Communication Union. And your opinion now. Do we really need the second license, the second permit for electronic communication operators who already have one license from the Commission regulating public services? Is the second license necessary or not. Thank you. Good afternoon. With Mr. Saryan, we're always in constant arguments because, as Russians say, this is the constant argument between physics and lyrics. And we comment about different terms differently because Mr. Saryan is concerned, for example, about the tubes, about the conduits with which the information reaches the consumer, and we in the first place are interested in the content, which, regardless of the use of the conduits, types of the conduits, should contain that content which leaves no place for doubts or is not a challenge for the Armenian society, both for our linguistic, information and communication security. Broadcasting, Mr. Saryan says, is not the broadcasting that we use, but it's all the same. We don't care. We use it as an operational concept, definition, which is included in the law, and nothing will be changed if instead of broadcasting, we will say Kim Kardashian, because we understand what is regulated by the law and what we are used to. But we are together in one thing. We are concerned, for example, about this frog leap development of technology that leaves very much behind the legislation. That's the most dangerous thing. If today in our activity, in this particular case in the law, we will use or we will input only today's reality and would forget or would not understand what's going to happen in this sphere in 10 or even 5 years, then we will really be entangled in this current regulation. Mr. Saryan gave very short explanation. The task of these operators, something like really very painful, curly imagination needs one in order to put in law something this example of acquisition of dual licenses. Well, somebody who is preparing a TV program, even not a TV creator, not an author, just a legal entity, somebody comes and says, I want to create a cable network, either in Yerevan or in one of the provinces or just all over Republic of Armenia. He bigs a huge, big business plan, financial justification. We look at it. If it's not in contradiction with the law, if there are all financial justifications, we give the permit. However, this company has come not with the purpose of creating a cable network. They have come with one purpose, so as they would be able to disseminate their own program created by themselves to broadcast it through any other cable network. But the law doesn't allow them to get into agreements with these providers if they won't have the permit from us, meaning they receive that permit for the second time. 1 month later, they approach us. As long as they already have this status of cable operator, they ask us to give them permit to broadcast their programs through UCOM cable network and shows the agreement with UCOM. We give this permit to broadcast through UCOM, and he forgets his business plan about creating a cable network in province, in Yerevan, or all over the Republic. Am I right? Turns out that your commission provides permit for creating content. The content is created already. We give permit. So as they would create a network, we'll name it X cable operator, who would like to provide this service in district North Marash, but they don't provide this service. They do it through another network. Again, it turns out that you allow them, you give them permit to create content and broadcast it through any other. For example, last December, Freedom radio station applied to us for such permit so as they would be able to broadcast their programs through other radio channels. But as long as the law is crooked, and first he had to apply for the license, and after receiving the license, he applied for a permit to broadcast through UCOM. If he places this content in Georgia, for example, if he creates this, and doesn't ask for a permit, okay, he can do it, but how is he going to broadcast through our cable networks? He had already access through internet. They were even in Czech Republic, not in Georgia. That's not the problem. But the problem is, why do I say? Our problem is about the conduits, the pipes, the tubes through which they were broadcasting, for which they did not need any permit. They could register in Madagascar, in Belize, and would do their broadcast in any way they wanted. But as long as in Armenia those who are using the services are fewer than those who are using the cable networks, they did it deliberately, so as to provide to be able to do broadcasting in the biggest cable network, meaning the competition has not reached yet the level so as these broadcasters would stop applying to us for licenses. Maybe 5 years later, maybe as when registering in any other country, they would be able to broadcast content which would have bigger audience as compared with today's, which is actually containing big risks for Armenia, and that's what we should speak about. The license that you provide allows to control, yes, how they use it, because if that's a problem. But what does our Commission of Regulating Public Services think about this? In this case, well, as of this, we are in an easier regulation domain. That is to say, we do not regulate the content. And that is to say, we are regulating only the infrastructure services. We provide only that kind of license. But I would agree with one thing with Mr. Hakopian, that the technological progress in our sphere has reached to the point when the legal regulation is lagging far behind it, regardless how much we try to go in harmony or go side by side with the development of the sphere. This problem is going to be always, and that's not peculiar to us only, that's a problem of everybody in the world, not only in such countries where the regulating commissions have huge resources and can do it on their own. They might have no such problem, but even in such countries which they have these resources are still lagging behind, and we are planning simplification of the license, which means that the license most probably will be abolished. Network licenses, yes, exactly, network licenses. If you know, before that we did have simple licenses which were providing for entities with permission to use numbers, internet IPs. So those who have simple licenses, simply through notification, will do their activity, and we assume in near future, and we have already this agreement with Armenia and EU. The government has taken this, the country, better say, has taken this commitment for harmonization of our legislation with the approximation, better say, with the EU legislation, which means that we're going to be in a hell of whoever wants to do whatever, let them do. There will be no license. Well, actually, that's not the document that allows anybody to do regulation of the sphere. There could be other secondary legislative acts regulating the sphere, meaning license is not the end of the world. We just want to take it out, because it's an unnecessary thing. And I think that, again, the work will be done, but not through license, but with simplified procedures. Just an addition, very often we are afraid of the word license. The problem is not in permitting or giving license. The problem is in regulating and the relation between the regulators and the operators. We call it license, we call it authorization, we call it notification or registration, doesn't matter. The problem is that all those broadcasters, the word which you don't like, all those service providers, audio-visual service providers, should be brought into one field. That's the most important thing. Models existing in the world are quite different. You know, this is humongous flow of information, huge capacities. But if we want to bring them into an equal field in the first place, we shall kill our current traditional TV and radio companies. And the whole problem is that bringing them into we have to bring into one field all this convergent new media who are absolutely out of control. And the first example is YouTube, which is not regulated at all, but everybody watches it. And YouTube has its internal editor, believe me. They have their clear-cut principles. In YouTube, you will never see pornography, you will never see violence, you will never see infringements of royalties of authors' rights which are registered immediately and stopped. Well, actually, we are giving control to an organization that is registered in the United States and ask them, control us. Mr. Arushanyan, you at the same time, you are working with those TV programs which are working from outside but are interesting in Armenia. What will happen if there will be no licensing? And don't you think that this dissemination will not infringe, authors' rights, copyrights, royalties? Can you tell something about this? For that purpose, for disseminating in cable networks, you need no permit. You need just an agreement, and it is to be submitted to the commission. And if it is there, then there is no question. Then there is no need to register in Armenia if it is disseminated through internet or cable networks. So just permit. You need just permit. And it seems to me that we have work for the further, questions for the further work. We have to go back to the clarification of the terms. What does mean TV channel in the current? Well, by the way, the legislation does not have such concept. TV channel. Frequency domain. And I am for making more strict, because in questions connected with the content, we have to think about, as Mr. Hakopian said, how to avoid in Armenia all this dangerous content and not allow it to be broadcasted. Today we have this issue of simplifying the registration. Well, if a person doesn't bring this channel to be registered in Armenia, does it in Georgia, but our users can absolutely get access to his broadcasts through Georgian servers. They can go through Georgia because he has already received permit. If this is a registered international channel, then if this is a TV channel, they have this legal address, then they can come and apply to Armenian cable. They don't apply, they are already acting in Georgia. Can't we just get in touch with get access to their server? And these are already internet broadcasts, so this is a different sphere. These kind of streamings exist everywhere in the world, and without even getting permit from us, they can do that. But why do they ask the same way as you spoke about YouTube. We again mixing two things. It's important to understand. In internet, you can get access to Al Qaeda dozens of info flows and familiarize yourself with their opinions. The issue is today about that networks which have the biggest audience. That's why they are interested to register, so as to use these cable networks and get access to corresponding audience. Secondly, they will provide the operator also income sources. Internet doesn't have this possibility. If this internet TV channel, which is registered in Georgia, will be watched by 100 people, if this same content will come enter the cable networks, for example UCOM, they will have 2,000 audience. That's the difference. That's why they register. Tomorrow, when they feel that through the registered here cable networks they have less audience than they have through internet in open space, then of course the necessity for registering or getting permits will go away. I am a subscriber to of Mr. Muradian's network. First, I can use this menu they have created. I don't know, very easy menu, 70 or whatever number of channels to which I have access. But I have Chrome through which I enter say sites which I like and watch movies through these sites. Can you tell me, do you have any statistics? Who is more watched and why? Which is more watched and why? Let me go back a little. In Armenia, these new technologies are regulated by laws that were written 20 years ago, which is inconsistent with the current developments. And one of the lacks is the so-called OTT, like the registered outside OTT companies come and act in Armenia without any rights. They compete and take money out of the country, and the companies that are operating here must be licensed. But when I watch internet, I pay only for internet. An absurd situation. Somebody wants to act in Armenia has problems. Some organizations who have registered in offshore zones, they have no problems in acting in Armenia. Maybe let's abolish this license too. Well, if we abolish this license, it will create chaos. Chaos never brings to anything good. And I am for regulation, but not half of the field, but all of the field. We have to define what is an OTT, and everybody should play on equal conditions. One of my friends said the only thing we can do for business is not to interfere. If we are interfering, then let's interfere with everybody. So everybody understands that it is necessary to update the acting legislation. How? Maybe I would not use the word upgrade or update. I would use the term fundamentally changing. Mr. Hakopian, you are making a very risky declaration. Look, today we are speaking of the law on TV and radio. TV and radio are traditional media, which are little by little losing their significance and visibility. Here we speak not about the regulation of radio and TV, because these old concepts of overland broadcasters and whatever have become obsolete. We have to regulate today the whole sphere of audiovisual services, because what does ARPANET? That's a service. What the OTT providers do, that is a service. Video on demand is a service. Whatever is happening in internet is a service, and these are for-profit activities. And if we don't bring them into equal field, if we won't speak of the audiovisual service regulations, then we will put in a very bad situation the decent Armenian citizens, and we will push out other service providers from the regulation sphere, and very often the service is provided, especially from outside, not only for the sake of profit, but also for propaganda, for affecting the public opinion, for creating panic. We have a lot of opponents who would like to use this. That's why, if today we are regulating only the linear services, these are just regular radio and TV programs which have their channels, lists, and this who everybody knows, and these are the old classical TV radio stations who are broadcasting according to their programs. Then we have to regulate also somehow at least the non-linear services, all of these OTTs and whatever is there in the internet. That's the most difficult issue. When we speak of cyber security, we mean technical security. Here, I am more interested in content security. Because, look, all these outsider companies, let's take a small one, all of their languages mainly are foreign languages. Russian, could be Chinese, could be Farsi, Arabic, English. And all information we receive comes not in our native language, which means that our language security is violated. The children's rights are violated because we are unable to just take someone, say, you have shown beating animals, which is prohibited in our country. In Saudi Arabia, they show even how they publicly behead people. And if this regulating body would not work there, and if they would not have right to say apply some punitive measures, sanctions up to prohibiting all of this in the territory of Armenia, then we will be in say zone that is endangering our information and national security. That's a long story. One thing is clear. All providers of audiovisual services should be in equally regulated field. We passed to Chris. Now, I want to ask Christina, what is your opinion? Christina, who is representing the interests of our operators as the head of the union. Mr. Hakopian very beautifully presented all that could be said on that topic, but I want to confirm that yes, indeed, everybody should be in one equal sphere, which should be, of course, competitive, but everybody should be licensed, and everybody should receive a license as for internet broadcasting, as for cable network broadcasting. That is to say, the field must be regulated. As of now, we have an unregulated field where everybody does whatever they want, and the good, decent citizens pay, and the rest just do whatever they want. Besides that, internet, for example, broadcasts are not regulated, and indeed, it is a danger to our information security. Anything could be shown, anything could be watched, and all of this should be regulated by legislation, and some processes should be undertaken, and I think there should be licensing. I am aware the Union of Operator has made an initiative on amendments in the law. I also have sent some suggestions. I am suggesting to make the approach, to make it more modern, because the offers that coming from your operators are about a little bit improving the old laws. Whether Mr. Hakopian said the law must be changed fundamentally with new approach. Well, we absolutely agree with Mr. Hakopian. We simply have presented our suggestions, what's interfering, what problems have the operators. We have made these suggestions to the National Assembly, to the Commission, to the Ministry. We have talked about it. We have it is ongoing work. After this, there's going to be another session where we will discuss in more detail all those issues that we have voiced and all those other organizations that have joined us. So after this, I invite you to the neighboring room to continue discussion in a little bit different direction. Well, I think as a wrap-up, we could say the following. Everybody understands that in connection with development of technology, the legislation is lagging so back, far back, that even terminological problems are now not possible to solve. As long as Armenian is not an international language, we should take those definitions which are in English. And at least we have ITU, we have ICANN, which has all these definitions. Fred talked today about the IETF, which also has definitions. And if we base on these definitions, then our legislation will never be in conflict with any European legislation, and we shall be compliant to European approaches. But nevertheless, I agree that it is necessary to fundamentally radically change the legislation about radio and TV. At least because the current, now let's go back to the terminology. Today, everybody, instead of broadcasting, say access. It's not that they give it to us, but we go and take it from them. Interesting approach. Nobody is broadcasting today. The material is in the server. Well, if you speak about internet, yes, TV too. Besides internet, there are other broadcasters as well, and you always forget about them. Well, indeed, their audience is much, much wider, but these innovations are necessary. I think as soon as possible we should deal with them, and I'm happy that today we managed to speak about this in such good terms, and that's a big achievement, frankly. All the members of state bodies have this opportunity to express their opinion openly without being afraid of criticism. Yes, questions, please. There are many questions. Vache, please. Thank you, firstly. Very interesting discussion. It was indeed. My question is the following. Well, actually, I have two questions. No, it's not mine. Two questions were discussed. The infrastructure and the content. I am sure for everybody the infrastructure is very interesting, but even more interesting and maybe more important is the content. And from that point of view, my question is the answer to which, frankly, I am unable to find for myself. It's not a secret for anybody. Here we spoke that, for example, we could get access to Al-Qaeda's sites, to other types of sites also, but also our internal content is very small, actually. Let's be straight. The quality sucks of our own content. And here, most probably, of course, this is the matter of lack of financing, but we talked about the regulations as well. From the point of view of regulations, in your opinion, what approaches could be used so as to at least to somehow improve this issue? What was the issue? Content, the quality of the content. Yeah, well, let me try to give you a short answer, because actually you asked a very conceptual question. Look, the biggest platforms that are available to Yerevan in Armenia are the TV, so-called in old terminology, and so-called on-land broadcasters, meaning all those TV, radio companies that are receiving this license and broadcasting either in FM frequencies or by digital multiplex. Maybe we are the only country in the world, according to our studies, where in the public multiplex any any user or any company that was used by the power could operate, meaning purchasing, oh no, not purchasing, meaning pursuing, just imagine, partisan issues. Don't believe me, there is no other such multiplex in the world where any foreign company could do such thing. Netherlands and Belgium are very close neighbors, but in Belgian public multiplex there can't be any Netherlandish broadcast. All of this should be changed, meaning in the minimum social package, in the license agreement for broadcasting in multiplex should be terms, minimum terms. What kind of programs you are going to provide? How are you going to provide the diversity? Do you take obligation to broadcast the Armenian national music? What percentage should be the Armenian content, Armenian produced content? What is prohibited at all? That is to say, the number of publicly useful programs should be included, or time, for example. So any company that is going to use the multiplex should have some social responsibility. Those who do not want to bear this responsibility, all those who are only wanting to have profit, to show soap operas, well, a lot of countries in the world do this. They say, go look Italian cable networks, go look Brazilian. I have never seen such ugly things. And if you want, then go to private multiplex and do broadcast whatever you want. Broadcast by satellite, of course, in the framework of the requirements of the law, like no violence, no discrimination, no hate speech, no racism, no child abuse. But minimum standards that we need are already accepted in the world. It's clear that many companies today are unable to provide such quality content because it needs money. High quality content needs more investment, naturally, and very often it kind of attracts lesser audience, because, for example, broadcasting Khachaturian concert Sinfonia, of course it would have less audience than Armenchik's broadcast, and lesser audience, the lesser profit from the advertisement. In Japan or France, they give the standard and they just have to deal with it because the advertisement field is very big. In smaller countries like Latvia and Estonia, they have done this differently. They have special state budget funds which are giving money for publicly useful programs, like programs for children, educational, documentary. They announce tenders, contests, and they finance, for example, our companies, they are broadcasting 200 series soap opera or cartoon series in Russian language, which they are broadcasting for years. And if I co-finance the translation, then whoever gives quality and whoever does it cheaper will get the money and do it. And this state financing provides kind of publicly useful, spiritual, educational, ecological information, historical. Unfortunately, this doesn't work in our countries. Everybody, all the load is on the public TV, which is wrong, because public TV is only just one of the broadcasters. And if you try to ask from or call other broadcasters to be at least a little bit social while using the multiplex, then you will have at least that field in the public multiplex that will provide or guarantee quality content. But this is only about the public multiplex. To force that all TV companies should be of high quality, it is impossible. But at least people should have this niche, this platform, this ray of hope, so as to be able to get access to high quality content. I'm unable to say more because this is a issue that demands huge discussion, and we have to do everything in order to, well, I suggest everybody think about this because I think this is very important, our opinion, but it would be good to listen to opinion of the general public. Now, about the content, when you say Armenian language, high quality content, actually, indeed, we have a huge gap. We say in the public ether, well, all this information is available to everybody free of charge. No, but no, we know that at least 50% of our audience uses cable TV. So whatever is available free of charge by public TV is to be paid through cable TV. And when a rating channel is given to one company, we are forced to bring other language broadcasts in order not to lose our business. We just are forced to do foreign language propaganda. This is to be regulated by law, so as whatever is available, even the sequence should be fixed by the Commission, so as Armenian language, channels were available on multiplex, so as to be able to disseminate information. It's not our fault. We know that we do everything to make your job easier. It is the, it is the imperfection of the law. All of those not Armenian language programs who you should be provided to cable networks, and that will free of charge, and that will solve the problem. Turns out that H1 is not the public TV, the whole multiplex is public. That's right. That is to be protocolized and voiced, because we see H1 as public and the rest not public. Well, that's so indeed, but I suggest to make it so as all users, everybody, all registered organizations would at least take some part of role. All of them are patriots, all of them are operating in this country, so they should do something. They should share this social responsibility. But H1 is receiving state financing, and the private ones are, but the others are taking advertisement. They are allowed to take advertisement. That's why I said whatever is not enough for good content, the state should co-finance or should sponsor. Mr. Grigorian, I have just a small question to Mr. Hakopian. When you say public, you mean like, how are you placing two channels of a foreign country in our public content? I said Armenia is the only country where a foreign broadcaster has frequencies in the public multiplex, but that is regulated by the law. Yes, indeed. That's why I say that in the new law, the project of which will be devised and adopted by the National Assembly, the entrance of foreign broadcasters should be prohibited from the public multiplex. Do you think that the public multiplex should consist of 8 TV channels, or you think that there should be only 1-2 public? That is to say, the state should provide access to public by 1-2 channels, and the rest should become should go on private multiplex. Well, I don't want to repeat myself. I said about this that the public multiplex should include not only the public broadcaster but also all those channels which will give part of their content to publicly useful programs, which will be fixed by the state and the methodology of the regulating commission. I won't even say the number, how many channels are to be in the public multiplex, because when you give the number, very much like those universities where they need to have full number of students, they will do it. No, whoever is corresponding to these requirements will be in multiplex. If they be 5, let it be 5. If 12, then let it be 12. But those channels which with their content will not meet the requirements for broadcasting in multiplex, public multiplex, which are dangerous for the society. They should not be in the multiplex. It doesn't mean that we forbid them to broadcast. There are, please, dozens of other platforms, but the public multiplex, which is paid by the state, which is available for everybody, there should be restrictions. And that's European experience and traditions which are brilliantly operating in developed countries. So that's what I mean. I wanted to speak on content regulation. That's a very, very subtle question. Yes, I'm just afraid of having the Armenian version of Roskomnadzor ultimately, and I am afraid that these issues should be very carefully approached. You are absolutely right that danger is always there of the freedom of speech, free journalism, and the public rights to have access to useful. Well, which are the guarantees of not becoming a Roskomnadzor? First guarantee is our status. If Roskomnadzor is a state body, then we are independent commission. Many would now laugh at this word independent, but we are indeed independent according to constitution. Nobody can, for example, fire us. It's a different thing that says some of our members of our commission, to what extent they themselves are aware of being independent, to what extent they use this independence in order to avoid censorship. Unfortunately, our public mentality has not reached that level of independence. But at least we can say that we have legally and constitutionally guarantees of our independence, and I assure you we are using this. And for 9 months I am the chairman. Nobody can call me and force anything, that's excluded, and force anything. Okay. Can I add something to what was said by Mr. Akopian? So what are we doing here? The IGF is also a monitoring, controlling instrument. When we come here, discuss these questions, have this chance to ask questions and receive answers, we also affect, this kind of, on these issues that we don't want to have censorship. When we speak on the freedom of speech, we take these operational definitions from the 20th century. Today, freedom of speech is already one peak. It's a one platform. I mean, it has been already achieved, and it is impossible to infringe it. Here we have a different challenge. It's not the freedom of speech the issue, but the misuse of the freedom of speech. And today we have to give the definition to this, so as to separate the freedom of speech of those floody shenanigans, of those flood of fake news which need to be regulated. Last two questions, because we are out of time already for 5 minutes. Liana? Ashot Merzoyan, Mr. Akopian, you say indeed something very important. You said that you do not have this authority. You said that the National Assembly is to devise this draft of the law. Don't you have this authority to at least be the initiator of the drafting the law? We can participate. Okay, if you do, can you make a legal initiative? Or who has this authority to make legal initiative? According to law and constitution, the Commission does not have any right for legal initiative, because if we did have such right, we would write such laws that would simplify the law, make it easier for us, or raise our status. Now look, what situation we face today in 3 sentences. A couple of non-governmental organizations have submitted drafts of law to the National Assembly, which is to be circulated by wide society. We have already given the assessment to the Commission has given. We think that these are not laws, these are simply narration of beautiful intentions, and they are not regulating the issues about which we talk today. I hope that the corresponding commission, Bahak Terusen, I think, is dealing with it there. Soon they will create this working team. By the end of October, there will be wide public hearings, and we shall try to create a draft. Yesterday and today, I have talked about this for 6 hours, just imagine, only around the draft of the law and the approaches which the Commission has is shared by them, and that's very, very encouraging. Just want to add something. After this, we are going to have a session where we shall have the presence of the representative of the National Assembly, who is now and I will suggest to talk about this in the course of the next session. Well, as we had already promised, Mr. Hamazaspian, the last question. Okay. I'm not going to misuse your time. This was very useful being here for me personally, because you are discussing topics which should not be limited with this platform, should ultimately go to National Assembly. Well, all deputies and the government, and I'm one of the deputies of the National Assembly, has the right for legal initiative. But to anticipate, and there has been many such cases, to anticipate that different professional groups of different interests will discuss this in different places, and then it will suddenly appear in the legal body, well, is naive. But well, there are things. But I mean that these discussions are very useful. There are things that should be done urgently. There are things that should be done slowly, step by step. That's what I wanted to say. Simply, when you asked who and how, I tried to answer. This is the way. Communicate clearly, narrate your approaches, and then push it forward through discussions. Yes, I would like this. If something is being drafted, the operators usually do not participate. I would like very much the operators to participate in this, because we are the front line. I would add that even we have to invite those people who are proprietors of some TV programs in Armenia. They also should participate in the discussion, because the main resistance comes from them. They say, if this is going to be free, then how are we going to make money? That's the question for them. My suggestion is that be in direct communication with all deputies are open, commissions are open. Like, yeah, in connection with other spheres, I see that people are complaining, talking through media, whereas they have this direct link to us. That is to say, we will always try to be useful, understanding certain technical parts connected with the operators, political issues. We are at your disposal. Thank you. With this, I finish this session. I want to thank our panel speakers, participants for very interesting questions. Which is in the British Museum, and usually when I am abroad and want to introduce Armenia, I start with this map, which shows our first tangible assets, that we have a place, a proof which shows where we have been. The idea is that even on a piece of stone, even through CUNY, this piece, we have managed to remain information about us that we can get access to right now. If the first picture I have taken from the internet, when you see at the bus stop there are technologically satiated bus stops. The second one I have taken from Echmiadzin yesterday. This smart bus stop that we have in Echmiadzin, which means that Armenia is also making steps in that direction. This book, I had the honor to be in Budapest by Springer Publishers. I'm representing Armenia, and I have touched. This is the first book that was created by the artificial intelligence. Monday we had this precedence when we enjoyed music written by AI, and this is the first book written by AI published by Springer. This is called Publication of the Next Generation, and by the way, it is open source. You can open it, you can read it online, and the book, as was presented by Dr. Nies Peter Thomas, who we had invited and who could not come to IGF because of certain reasons. Let's hope that next year we shall be able to enjoy his speech, to tell me how they publish these books. He used to say something very important. He said Springer started doing this first, and they have not solved yet legal and ethical issues connected with this kind of publications. And he said that we wanted to do this earlier than Google, because if Google starts doing this, then no legal or ethical norms will be followed. That's why they wanted somehow to put this plank for the publishing business of the next generation. How is this book being created? This is exactly the cross resume of those texts, which is organized based on sequence. Please remember this, because I'm going to speak about metadata. This is the case when Springer is very well developing its content, gives beautiful metadata to all of its materials. That's why this became possible for Springer doing this kind of publication. Most probably everybody remembers the newspaper. Sometimes with nostalgia I go along with the kiosks and want to buy a newspaper, then with a cup of coffee, enjoy it. But we don't do it anymore, and the newspapers stay in different archives. Today we have contemporary models in the internet, in our social networks. We have our own information, our news. This is a very interesting article published in the website of Cambridge University site, Andrew Gruen, in the research part, where he's suggesting a startup business model. And what he does, he suggests to take from all internet materials about celebrities, political entities, create portfolios and sell them as promotional materials to them. The fact that he says here something very important. He says it's all the same. It doesn't matter what will come to substitute the paper, newspaper. The important thing is the content that exists in the internet, and he suggests new information, new formulation for this existing information. The sooner the better, as each day of our history goes to digital sphere, space, the ether. Several years ago I talked about this. We had collected all these references, analyzed, and when we were to report about this and we were to say, look how media has reacted and it turned out that part of these references did not work, and it was only several months old, and we had only access to those materials. We had only copy-pasted and kept and processed by metadata and had preserved it. And 2 years ago I started thinking what to do. So as whatever is available in online we won't lose, because it seems to me in 5 years we'll have nothing to speak about today's. That is to say, this material is going to go circulate in ether and vanish. Already 5 years people think about this in the world. They started earlier in the United States, but very seriously, Forbes published this article by this author this May, who had managed a very interesting initiative in 2014, which was called Global. They were doing they were trying to create the human convictions and ideas and concepts from all over the world, and he is suggesting a very interesting revolutionary method. How are we going to unite the libraries, journalists and specialists of information technology in order to preserve the online news? We understand what we should do here. Journalism today is already digital. Very often they call it even simply digital communication. Information technologies create for us instruments, and the librarians should be able to preserve this material. And of course, we have to come out
նոր տեսակի գործունեություն ծավալել եւ հետագայում կարողանանք նոր ձևեր ապահովել սպասարկման համար այդ տեղեկույթը.
Okay, thank you. I'm not a journalist. 2-3 years ago, I started to study this platform, digital communications. 1 year I applied with one project. I didn't win it, and then I started watching what's going on. However, after a long search in the internet, I found this very interesting article. José Luis Orihuela is the author, professor of Navarra University, and very well, point by point, he gives a description on how the digital media has transformed, reformed or deformed in the new domain, and what's the difference between the old media, traditional media, and the new digital media. And he gives very well the conclusions that media today, what power it possesses. Actually, it is very important that media has started to leave to exist without these media platforms, because it comes, enters our social networks, it enters into our debates, comments, and the material, the news starts to live on its own. And this author is really greatly presenting it. There are different platforms in different countries that have united the electronic media of different countries. For example, there is the well-known newspapers.com, who offers to 530 million and more pages, offers this similar entities online newspaper where you can look through different countries to see what media news are there by topics, by types, by categories, and the press reader. But of course all of this has price, and to have access to all of them you have at least to have subscription in order to enter and get advantage of all of these online archives. Armenia has done a huge job in this respect in connection with paper press. The National Library has already digitized more than 5 million pages. All of them are available at the site third.nla.am. What is important that not only Armenia is participating in this project, but also different organizations from Armenian diaspora, Armenian study centers, Armenian libraries, which have archives of media. They are also doing digitization and having their contribution. This is a very important step for our country, because Armenian language literature and Armenian language media is not going to be done by anybody else but us and Armenians. And this list of the Armenian media, Armenian language media, is already something. We have this format how to develop the media culture. We have now to think of the algorithm that we want to develop for electronic news. China, for example, has starting from April 22, this article was published there, where around 200 billions have been brought to Sina.com platform, where they have Weibo and everything else. From one side, this is of course an instrument of control, frankly speaking, because it would be easier to control information collected in one space, but from the other side they call it country's digital heritage, which is really very important from the point of view of preservation of the national heritage. Today we write things in the internet and maybe it might seem that that's nothing, but 5 years later maybe that would become a value, and if we won't preserve it today, we won't find it 5 years later. Congress Library has been doing the same activities. They are preserving, archiving materials from the internet, but in connection with the elections of Trump, the number of Twitter publications increased, and they stopped doing it because they were unable to do more, because they couldn't deal with that huge amount of Twitter messages. Open science, this is a new term. Today we talk about not having corresponding terms in Armenian language. I was getting ready to this my speech, and I was dealing with the difficulties of translation of different terms, because indeed we in Armenian we do not have a lot of terms. We do not need translation, but they need adaptation. Now open access, open science, this is a new term which exists already for many years, and Armenia has seriously entered into several projects. Like we have this 4 Armenian universities are participating in Erasmus projects, where and universities have to place their scientific product online. What we publish and put in the archives usually is very difficult to access, and there is international database, DUAR, Director of Open Access Repositories, where all universities of the university can place their scientific product. Well, of course, we have started this only this year, and we're going, and this is a 3-year project. We will move slowly, but the idea is that the world has accepted the Open Access 2020 initiative, which says that all those studies which are made by the money provided by the taxpayers, like from the state budget, they should be immediately available to the society. Here come 2 types of regulations needed, one on the level of the country, one on the level of the universities. Why do I tell you all of this in the domain of preservation of online news? Because many often we have started to put our research results in social networks. Sometimes it's interesting, you write an idea, but the comments are so interesting that it would be possible to create an article on the comments. Here too, from the point of view of preservation of the science, we here also to think about this. This is an American platform. Let me tell you, I came to this reference through the Congress Library, where they have archived United States, mainly these sites. I have checked each of them. And it's interesting, you enter the site, it gives you calendar. Through calendar, you enter the news site of that day, and you can download in zip file, and the all material, media material of the day are available. It's really very interesting because they have a special policy on copyright, and it is allowed by login password only for personal research purposes. You have to use it for something, and it is only for personal use. It's not that everything is open for everybody. You apply, you justify what you need this for, and they give you login password. Data and metadata, exactly what I was saying about the Springer publication of this book, that metadata are very well developed. Today the world has gone forward so much that they have not university reserves but database reserves. In these database reserves, for example, if studies are made or inquiries are made, if they have, I don't know, testing things in the laboratories, the main data on this are placed in these data repositories, and if you try to search in Google a data repository, the first come Springer or Nature data repositories, which are the best from the point of view of processing as of this moment. And when speaking of metadata, I'm entering the sphere, the domain of the librarians, because besides librarian, nobody can work with the metadata. The librarians are well familiar with these 3 types of international criteria, which are used in the sphere of librarian business when we're doing electronic cataloging of books. And there are ready manuals on how we should preserve the digital media. That is, we don't need to create a bicycle, it already exists. People tell that I can't tell you more. I want to say that catalogization has special formats, and in Armenia the National Library has already developed this, like the prints for describing catalogization of the media. But here we have a very serious problem from the point of view of Armenian language. I found 3 online free open source instruments that immediately analyze the file and give the metadata, but unfortunately none of them reads Armenian, and that is a serious problem for Armenia. Last year I was in Spain and they had a scanner who would record everything and give out the metadata immediately, meaning they have indeed progressed. We have the Armenian law on libraries and librarian job, where in the article about the National Library there is this point 6 which says that the National Library must preserve everything, including media. That is to say, here we don't have the problem of the author's right, of the copyright as well. That's the function of the National Library, to collect, preserve and serve with the protection of the author's rights. Here I come back to my question: how to preserve online news in Armenian and in Armenia, because the instruments are available. The librarians who possess this methodology, who know the methodology, everything is available, but here I see we have people of IT sphere. We need harvesters who would work for Armenian language and would collect this information from the internet. Then we will develop the algorithm and we'll pass it to the National Library, and the librarians would be able to archivize this information and devise the metadata, and say if 5 years, 10 years later you will need to find some information from the internet, that would be available through the principle of one window. This much I'd like to say. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, is there a platform where, say, volunteers can sign up to work to collect information, to harvest information? Yeah, we have this issue with harvesting. I understand. I want to say this: harvesting information is a technology which people should know in order to do this. Is there a place where we can, for example, get training on how it can be done? No, actually. In other countries they do it with different languages, but we do not have these instruments for Armenian language. There are different types of instruments which I can't introduce right now, but which are used on scientific materials, but none of them works with Armenian language, not because of our script. We have this problem with Armenian language. When we have this harvester with corresponding algorithm, or what it takes from where, written in Armenian language, then archivization of this material will be quite easy, done by the librarians. Our problem is the lack of this instrument that we do not possess right now. Okay, the discussion is going on in the rear of the hall, but not in the microphone. Okay. I am introducing, I'm representing the Armenian chapter of ISOC, non-governmental organization, and being the Armenia chapter of the Global Internet Society, we share the mission and the vision of the ISOC, Global ISOC. We work with Global ISOC doing different programs which are very important for Armenia, and together along with this we are also kind of doing this mission of ISOC. The Internet Society every year announces a small grant award for different programs. This year it was called Connecting the Unconnected, Chapterton 2019, and the idea was this year's motto is Connecting the Unconnected, is involving those who are not involved, and the goal of the Internet Society is to join to internet additionally 1 billion population, and if today 4.5 billion are in, then with this Connecting the Unconnecting motto, another 1 billion people should be joined. And we had to show how we do this, how we help to do this. And in Armenia, we have chosen the road of helping vulnerable groups of population in Armenia. And this mission. And look, this project helps to connect people and from 34 different sectors of the world. They participated in this program with their corresponding programs, and we have submitted ours, which is titled Connecting Unconnected Schools, Libraries, Disabled People, Libraries to Internet. That is why we want to connect the provincial and rural libraries, schools, and public organizations to Internet. And with that purpose, we have devised this program. We have chosen several organizations and schools whom we can support. And the first you see is the Razdan Employment Club of Retired Person, who is rather doing well in Razdan and has 108 members. And you see, they do different very interesting programs. And we decided to give them 3 computers and to pay for their training, in the course of which these retired people were supposed to study how to use internet and social networks. And I want to show you this picture, like for example this photo shows this club of retired person and the 3 computers that we have gifted them. And by the way, these computers we buy used already from in the market of used computers, but we managed to use they have 3 gig RAM and 160 gigabyte hard RAM. We also use in our office core to do computers, and I think that they should be satisfied with these computers. Aliana, please click to show the next picture photo. On the picture, on the photo, please click. So we had asked them to say something, and now you will listen. Our Retired Persons Club expresses gratitude to the ISOC Armenia organization for gifting us these computers, thanks to which more than 100 people of the organization can communicate through internet. So imagine these retired people having received this opportunity in their club, they can join and can subscribe, and they do it. They list in a queue, they subscribe to a queue, and they use the computer in one after another. So we teach people how to use it. So our purpose is to help the vulnerable groups of Armenia, be these disabled people or retired people or border close schools. And the other example is this one. Please, this is one of Ashtarak public schools. Pay attention how beautiful faces, handsome faces we see. Can you make bigger the screen? The Ashtarak number 2, on behalf of the Ashtarak number 2 school, and so they thank. Imagine what potential we have in our provinces. This school, which has 100 students only, they have only 2 or 3 computers, and it is interesting how they all of them, they gather around these 3 computers and have their informatics lessons, try to learn something. That's why I call everybody, all those who have this possibility, if you have used computers, even not operational, we can repair them, we can replenish them and provide them to Armenian schools, to schools in Armenia. And we also provide Wi-Fi routers. If the library is connected to the internet, so as you see, everybody with their smartphones manage to join internet and use it. And this is village Solag, this is village Noryerzanka, this is village Enkarsi, and this they, as you see, our next purpose is to provide 3 computers to Vazashen, then 2 computers to Hachik village, 2 computers we give to NGO Auxilium, and the purpose of this is providing computers to disabled people and provide online training with the anticipation that after these online trainings the disabled people will be able to find some jobs, whatever kind of jobs. Although I have to say that one of our members who is working with the help of STIX, who has graduated the American University of Armenia and has several graduation certificates, has studied in the United States. He's a highly qualified specialist, is actually unemployed. Imagine such a person, individual, who has such a huge pool of information, knowledge of English, and is unable to find a job. We try to involve him in our future programs. When he applies to the government asking for a job, they say, you are not on a wheelchair, so you are not disabled. So they don't give him a job. And continuously, we are going to accomplish these programs, and these programs the grant of this program is only $2,000. In the framework of $2,000, we provide 15 computers, provide training, do renovation of the computers, do all of this using the Armenian ISOC Armenia chapter resources. What I want to say is, I want to call simply everybody, please pay attention to our provinces, our villages, because they are brilliant children. And if we manage to provide knowledge to these children, I am sure that Armenia's progress in these information technologies of Armenia will be sooner, because very often we think that we have good internet in Armenia, and that we have good computers, and that is the solution of the issue. But believe me, when you visit a rural village or library and you see the situation there, you say not only Yerevan is to be developed, provinces should be developed. That's why we have chosen to make our priority the help to these kind of vulnerable groups. Imagine when sometimes we give a computer to a library, when we go to that library and we see that the computer is not there. Turns out that the head of the village has taken the computer home. Even these kind of cases could happen. So we have to monitor, we have to follow up so as the computers be used for their purpose. And I wanted to say about another program as well. These are the rural libraries of Armenia, to which we have given computers. And by the way, we have developed our own system of management of libraries, which is working very, very lightly, and it doesn't need too much memory, it doesn't need operative memory, whatever. And it is working quite well, and it helps to do the catalogization of books, for searching things, for finding books in their databases, and that's free. And this is an open source, and this program is placed on our site, and from every rural library, if they have internet, they can use it for their purposes. Till today, we have placed this in 170 villages, 170 computers. We assess that there are around 2,000 rural villages in Armenia which need this kind of computers, and we managed to do this program. We help our grant possibilities. The last application to grant, Czech embassy had declared a grant, the purpose of which is to improve the situation in certain provinces and villages of Armenia. We have applied to that grant, and we hope that if we receive that grant, then we shall be able to disseminate additional 50 computers in Armenian villages. This much for attention. Thank you for attention. I am Arman Atoyan, founding director of the company Xtech. We are more known by our startup company, which is, and the topic is about the digitization. A lot is spoken about this, and if you do not object, I will do it this way to make it more comfortable. So a lot is said about digitization. I have to say that digitization is much wider than simply Digitization is much wider and can even reach wider scales. If you saw in the agenda, it was said Armenia AR written with capitalized letters. Maybe you thought why it is so, but that's not incidental. The idea is AR is the name of the technology, augmented reality, and in our understanding, our mission or our strategy is to make the first AR country. First, from that point of view, so as AR would be used in different spheres and have different solutions. Let's start from one of our recent projects. This is street art digitization, example of street art graffiti digitization. And we imagine that in different parts of our city with this solution we can become different and interesting. If we were to ask how does this picture impact on the visitors, they have very interesting impression. Well, the wall is next to the museum of Aram Khachaturian. Of course, people come watch the wall and then they are interested to go into the Aram Khachaturian's museum. There are pictures, photos from different operas and ballets of Aram Khachaturian. When you direct your smartphone to these pictures become animated. If we try to imagine what would be the impact of this technology on education and science, it would be unlimited, limitless. When we look at how much time our young people spend time with smartphones, it's evident that it's useless to fight against it. You should not forbid children using smartphones. Of course, somehow it should be limited, but let's think about it differently. Let's think about using the smartphone in favor, or how to use it in education, for example. Well, it's clear we can go forward. The project was launched 4 years ago together with Austrian partners in Austria. We are they are publishing books, and already we speak with the third government. And now this is a pilot project on the 7th, 8th grade books of physics. We shall have this possibility to use this application, and we shall be able to measure whether this application is impacting the education. But different experiments show that children are very interested, and they start they explain each other what processes are going on, and something important is really happening here, that according to different studies, the most difficult thing is creating interest, and after that everything will go on their own. And this is a beautiful example. If we imagine that the class of astronomy, unfortunately they say they don't teach astronomy at schools, but before they used to do. Just imagine if you study astronomy with this format, how interesting would it be? And I would like very much myself to go and study again. And the application is much wider, and the impact on the economy. And we talk about this economic revolution constantly, and we say that this revolution can't be without the use of technology. Another example from another sphere, the implementation of technology in textile industry. We say that the textile product which is produced in Armenia, which is not better than Uzbek textile from the point of view of the quality of cotton, but could be better from the technological point of view.
Երկրորդ արքայից արքա, հայոց արտաշեսյան թագավորության վերջին հզոր գահակալը, մեր թվարկությունից առաջ 30 թվականին
These experiments that take place in the shop, like from feedback shop, when tourists come to buy this T-shirt, when they see this interactive version, they immediately choose it. We imagine if, for example, this designer works will be animated, produced in Armenia. Of course, they will be chosen among many products, and we are interested in using this in other spheres as well. The most interesting, one of the most interesting and good projects of 2018 was together with WWF Armenia, who asked us with the following thing, that they said that there is in Armenia the problem of the protection of Caucasian leopard. They are going to make fundraising. That is to say, a lot of people should be informed about this, and so as when they start the fundraising, they would know that indeed in Armenia there is this Caucasian leopard, and it is endangered species, and we need to give money to help protect it. And as a solution, we suggested to place in different places of the city these pictures that could be animated, and we had even bigger result than we anticipated. But just imagine, say the developed world rejects zoos and say that is normal. That is not normal to keep animals in cages, but in order to show animals to children, you can use this technology as educational material, as entertainment in the digital form, to show animals. It's a little bit with humor, the clip. Little bit ironic. Armenian Mowgli, if you could say so. So you can see the results indeed when we introduced it. After that, the Minister of Ecology and different businesses joined, connected with WWF and said that they would like to join the campaign, and they would use this symbol to. Okay, let's go on and speak about the following possibilities. We imagine that digitization means also the export of our content. That is to say, constantly we say that we have 1,000-year-old content, which is partially in museums and in our depository of manuscripts, but we don't think about this content. So usually we imagine visits of tourists, and that's it. But we forget that we have 7 million diaspora that is interested. At least 7 million people are interested in this content. Quite recently, with this concept, we did a project in Moscow. There are Armenian Culture Days going on in Moscow, and we did this following project, that exhibition of Parajanov's picture paintings. We transferred to Moscow to concrete 5 locations in the yard of the church, in the yard of the embassy, and the key is the location. If you don't come to the location, you won't be able to see it. So the key is the location, as I said. Okay, with the same logic, you can imagine monetization of this content in any other country, like you can monetize it in New York or any other place. This is interesting, the direction of projects and digitization, the reconstruction of old views. Like people who come to Yerevan, very often tourists say, "Where is your old city? How can we see it?" And again, the answer could be in digital form. We started such a project with Ararat Brandy Factory, with which, and you can see the old Yerevan. Yeah, the general idea was clear, and there was also a project with which we were animating sculptures. You can see it in our YouTube, only simply as time is short. Currently, you can, for example, have such photorealistic avatars, 3D personages. Of course, you know that who is this? This is Ovanes Tomanyan. But today the phones are not so powerful to show them like this. We understand that the iPhones and Samsungs should change in order to acquire this image, but we're not thinking of what's going on right now, but where we're going in 5-10 years, and we in the direction we think that with these photorealistic images will meet us in their museums. This project was done for William Saroyan Fresno Museum, where he, in the museum, with his own voice, gives messages to the visitors. And the city guide today is people want very much to have Maher Makarchan guiding visitors in Gyumri. Here I could we want to digitally reconstruct Zvartnots, Temple of Zvartnots, and we want to have it in 2020. And most probably this is important, that different studies show that the next generation is going to choose the REVR, which is a message for all of us, so as to adapt the content to that. Thank you, Armen. A very interesting presentation and the technologies that are developing. I'd say, for example, these are my dream textbooks. I would personally go back to school with great pleasure. I always imagine that, for example, the manuals, the books of history with battles, with battleships and elephants. Indeed, that is great, giving instruments to our next generation. Okay, now I want to invite the speakers of the next panel and our moderator, Ruben Muradzian, expert of cybersecurity, is going to lead this session, and I think that we are going to have very interesting discussion. And that was not incidental, that even with data placement, we started speaking of cybersecurity, and the discussion will continue. I want to invite my colleagues who are going to participate at this session. Mr. Hamazas Danelian, please. Most probably will come soon, join us soon. Next speaker. Artur Danelian, who is representing the National Security Service, and Samuel Omanesyan, who has worked rather long in the police of Armenia and have dealt with investigation of cyber crimes. Yeah, please take your seats. Samvel Ovsepian, sorry, he corrected me, it's not. Yeah, we have a clicker, I suppose, and let me use it. Cybersecurity Center, governmental. Mr. Aboyan, hello, please sit down, take your seat. Before I would introduce I'm Ruben Muradzian. For the last 20 years I'm dealing with cybersecurity. Before starting this, my introductory speech, I want to warn you, colleagues. I will use 10 minutes of time to outline the problems that I see in this process, and will pass the floor to you. 5 minutes per each in the first session, and then we shall see how it will happen. Before starting this conversation, I would like to tell you a story which I like very much, and which, when we speak about the development of cybersecurity or about the development of IT or writing the strategy, I very much like telling it. In somewhat 1980 something year, my aunt called my mom and said that her son, and that is my brother, my cousin, was to be sent to the group on studying French language, and the class was to be divided, to be taught 3 languages, English, Spanish and French. And she called my mother, and my mother said, you know, English is better, let him go to better. And she said, look, what's going to be the difference if he doesn't know any of these languages? Indeed. So I want to tell you what's going on right now. I want to widely outline the problems I see in what is going on in our country with cyber security, information security in this field. The first, the most important thing about which I'd like to say is that we have terminological confusion. We speak of information security, and very often this information security is understood as the entrance of different information blocks or information pieces in our information sphere. Very often they speak of propaganda of Azerbaijani ideas and this and that, different shenanigans. You have to understand that information security is absolutely different of cyber security. Vulgarly speaking, so cyber security is something in the focus of attention of engineers, and information security, I don't know who's dealing with it. Me, as a specialist of cyber security, I will give you this definition from the standards, ISO standards 127000. It says, the definition is written on the screen. I'm lagging a little bit. I'm slow in translating what is written. Whether cyber security is defining the confidentiality, wholeness, and accessibility of information in cyberspace. And later we shall see what it is about. We have analogous information, and we have a lot of digital information. Both analogous and digital information are defined by the term information security, both of them. Whereas cyber security deals with part of the information and other things which are not information. That is to say, the correctness of the work of information systems, security of work on information system, defense of information systems from not sanctioned access, other illustration of the same thesis. We have digital information, which belongs to what we call information, as to what we call cyber information. Actually, these two concepts, dear colleagues, if you have ideas about this, I would gladly listen to them. If you do object, I would listen even with greater pleasure, and let's go on. Now, about the cyber security as of today. There is a principle that cyber security is defined by the centers of cyber security. Practically everybody knows such abbreviation as CERT. That is the approach that was realized in the United States, first in the University of Carnegie Mellon, then it was developed further, and at the end, in the United States, they defined 3 levels of centers of cybersecurity. First is the national level of CERT, which is working at the University of Carnegie Mellon, still more or less independent, and it is dealing with problems of cyber security for United States on national level. Then there is a separate center of cyber security for state bodies, and there is huge number of private centers of cyber security which are solving these or other issues. Other sectors of cyber security that are dealing with the objects of critical infrastructure, for example, electric stations, nuclear power stations, cybersecurity for systems of healthcare, and so on and so on. And there are private centers of cybersecurity. The most well-known is the Cisco Talas. There is a beautiful project which again is there and is working in this framework. That is Google Ground Zero. There are special teams of cybersecurity which are doing research in IBM, Lookout. That is to say, cybersecurity in private sector is also very actively developing. The approaches on state level could be divided into 3. The first approach is the American, where there are 3 levels of centers of cyber security: state, national, and private, and sectoral, let's say so, because with private, that's a different story. There is the approach of European Union, when there is no national level, there is state level and sectoral level, and there is the Russian level, where there is only state level and there are some private versions, because in United States, in Russia, we do not allow anybody else to work in this sphere. In Armenia, this center of cybersecurity works with ArmSocket, and there is a beautiful initiative which was started by Samuel Martyrosyan, Andernik Papian, and my colleagues. I'm happy that they started this, which is called CVSoft. You might see them at the site cvsoft.am. That there is the idea that some analogy of this should be in the financial sphere. I am sure that power ministries do have their own centers of cybersecurity. For example, the Ministry of Defense should have their own stuff, and in the National Security Service also they have such stuff. What approaches are good for us? What principles are good for us? Also, I would like my colleagues to speak about it. So, which are the main problems, in my opinion, in Armenia in this respect? The first and most important one is that we have developed the strategy on information security. It was developed, if I'm not mistaken, in 2017, and it was developed, but it was not published. We know that the strategy exists. We know that something was done. We know that actually we as specialists should somehow implement it, but what to implement, nobody knows. And remember that great joke when somebody asks, "Do you see the beaver?" No, but it exists. So that's it. The strategy on information security is available to limited circle of individuals. Public is not participate. That's a closed process. Process closed as such. People sit around tables, develop something, and then publish something. What's most unpleasant in all this economy is that it creates this feeling of false security. We simply know that there are certain documents, certain laws, certain bodies should do this, but nobody knows how it is being done, who's doing what, and we do not even imagine how all of this is to happen. And that's kind of dark wood. I want to say this beautiful initiative of CiviCert, which is when people just understood that journalists and organizations, non-governmental organizations, need support, need protection from different unpleasantnesses. And again, colleagues, I would listen to your opinion in this respect. The next thing, quite unpleasant thing, but nevertheless we need to speak about it and to speak about it aloud, that the state bodies, they prefer to hide information about cyber incidents. If you remember, at ArmIGF of 2017, I was at a very similar panel and we were talking about that there were sophistications in the course of the 6-day war with provision of state resources, and that the state officials tried to deny, to say that nothing like that had happened, that everything was good, and whereas everybody knew that in the course of the first 2 days of the war, the access to Armenian state sites was hindered. And Arturjan, I mean you, Arsenjan, I mean you. A year ago, we were talking about this, that we had this big trouble in system of malware, and in the system of malware there was a vulnerability. This screenshot was disseminated by Azeris. You look at the screenshot, you understand that turns out actually seems to be correct, but when you try to understand whether there was this breakage, whether there has been leakage or not, our colleagues from the state services and colleagues that are dealing with servicing malware would give different opinions. And here we have to say that most probably it is necessary to think of the mandatory, compulsory revelation of information, adopt some kind of law so as it would be out of law to conceal this information. That's an international practice, by the way. And I welcome very much that undertaking initiative that started this year, if I'm not mistaken, 3 months ago, when the system that was to be invested in the state subsystem of IT, for which was announced an open contest on the search of vulnerability in the American university. For 24 hours, specialists tried to hack it and they achieved something. I welcome this with both hands, because the more we work in the direction of finding vulnerabilities before investing in new systems, that will bring to the maximum state of security. Coming back, why did I tell you about what language my cousin would not know? The thing is that when we speak about that everything will be secret, everything will be concealed, hidden, that we are going to have a policy on information security about which nobody will know anything. We will create dead products, dead processes, products about which nobody knows anything, which nobody implements, which nobody uses, and unless these products are used, unless they are available and they are not something important for us workers of this industry, unless they are not a guideline or approach that are called to guide us, all of this will be, the situation will be as we have it today. At the end, I want to tell you a story was told me by Alexander, big bearded man with long hair from Russia. He was recently in Ukraine, and at one of the conferences in Ukraine, somebody came out and said, I want to thank the Ministry of New Technologies and Internet of Ukraine that we have very open internet. And somebody corrected him. There is no Ministry of Internet and Ministry of Technologies. And he said, that's exactly for what I want to thank him, that there is no Ministry of Internet and High Technologies in Ukraine. Yeah, 5 minutes to each of the speakers, then we shall go the second round. Thank you. Let me start from the beginning. If I miss something, please remind me. Let me start from the strategy, as you mentioned. Before developing the strategy, there was, by the order of the President of 2017, this concept of information security and information and the concept is higher than the strategy, where by the decree of the President a lot of terms have been corroborated, including cybersecurity, information security, cyberspace, and a whole range of terms which are defined already by the law in our country, by the decree corroborated by the President. And one of the chapters of that concept assumed that then we had to the working team was to develop the corresponding strategy and to approve it. You highlighted it that the strategy was approved, but it wasn't submitted for confirmation of the government, and it was not adopted actually. But the terms are already adopted by the Armenian government by that concept. Almost. There, we consider more cybersecurity as part of the information security. The information security is considered as information policy, propaganda, anti-propaganda. Cyber is considered more for infrastructure. It is the protection, security of cyberspace. And then comes the definition of cyberspace. What does it mean? Well, for terminology, what I can say, in the framework of the working team, from 15 people involved, 10 would not agree, and well, of course, the terms, everybody has their own opinions, but in general terms, the private parties have also participated in this concept, in devising this concept, and these terms were adopted. That much about this. In respect of CERT, our understanding is, the understanding of our service, that CERT is to be state-owned, is to be public, and around it we can have also sectoral CERTs. For banks, CERT for banks critical informational and infrastructures we should have sent, but all of them should be somehow connected with the state CERT. Opening brackets, let me tell you that as of now we already have preconditions for evolving some kind of CERT. Well, it's too preliminary, could not happen even. I don't know whether next year it will happen or not. You said last year why it didn't happen this year. Well, that's why I highlight that it could not happen. But there is some documentation written about this. We try to start such a process with EKENG to create something like a monitoring center, to develop it somehow based on something. That's much about CERT. What other questions do we have? And the concept is published already. It's not available in ARLIS, but it was confirmed by the president and it was adopted. And yeah, you can find it maybe in the presidential site, huh? If we have such something. People, please talk into the microphone. Please talk into the microphone. Okay, let's ask Artur to send whatever has been published, because I have not seen it either. Let him send it to Grisha, and Grisha will disseminate it through mails. Sorry, Ruben, don't ask me, because Grigory Mikhailovich has it, and when we were developing this in the working group, colleagues, why do I say this? Because for me it is very important to have it published. The link to some kind of site, if there is, it is there, I will shut up. Well, of course, all of us can have anything and everything. I have, I don't know, terabyte of stolen passwords from all the resources, well, which does not mean that I'm going to look through all these resources. Grigorich has been member of the working team, and you don't need to send it. He has it. As soon as Grigory Mikhailovich will share this with me, you will arrest him and put in jail. But that is an open document, not at all. Not going to, incarcerate Grigory Mikhailovich for. Okay, if then, so send it to me. We shall come back to the questions and answers at the end. Okay. Yes, at the end, please. Another, let me. Again, as a specialist, in respect of cyber incidents for the state, for publication by the state, I, as member of this service, as an interested person, I haven't seen any example anywhere in the world when the state would take and publish its cyber incidents. Tell me an example. I don't know such an example. It seems to me that all states of the world are avoiding, eschewing, publishing the cyber incidents. The publication is not that that there are such cyber incidents with our security resources. It's not that we do not pay attention. It's not that we neglect them. It's not that we do not discuss them or try to do something about them. But we do not publish it. We do not speak of this with media that so as Azerbaijan or any other nemesis or apostasy would sit down and watch what are our vulnerabilities or where we have failed. Okay. In issues of cyber security, the police is involved mainly as reactive body to incidents. Mostly we do not participate in the devising of policy. Maximum we can have some participation as not as authorized body. We, of course, there is a separate division in the police which was created in 2005, and I was there with them. This entity is called High Tech Sphere Crime Division, and we are also we are under the Chief Department of Organized Crime. And in the course of the past years, the Convention on Cyber, after ratifying the Convention of Cyber Securities, the police has its representative in the Commission of Convention on Cyber Crimes, and we are members to some focal points as of the cyber crime contact points, Interpol focal points, contact points, and I mean the 7G cyber crime contact points. We cooperate with them, and we have connection with the bodies that are performing the same functions of different countries with corresponding subdivisions or divisions of their bodies. Besides, in the course of international communication, when we study the experience of different countries, the CERT, security, besides the security incident response teams, we create 3C units, computer crime centers. And what would you say about the definition of these terms? Well, mainly the information security or cyber security, as Daniel said, is the same approach. Well, they are not the same things at all, not at all. Of course, cyber is the infrastructure systems, the engineering wing, and information security includes as well the content. Okay, thank you. Hamazasbjan, turn is yours. I also will start my speech with a story. Most probably, yeah. I want to tell you a story. I know what I know. I know also what I do not know. And this topic is not such as I possess it. What you said in respect of the terms is logical, but actually I can't express any approach. But I know one thing, that in Armenia, old or new, there could not have been the definition, and with there could not have been a strategy with definition. And so I'm not sure that, and I'm happy that my colleagues say that actually that is a process. That the strategy is a public document which is a living document. I know that very often we, in our suppositions, in our gossips or talks or conversations, maybe by inertia as well, maybe because of the former not so successful experience, we insist that, in your case, for example, I saw that the management bodies are focused on concealing information, and that was good that you then said that it's not in general about all types of crimes, but about incidents in cyber crime. But whereas this question is, the problem is that the governmental bodies are different and they pursue different tasks. Yes, in some instances, indeed, certain information is not published, and that's a problem, but usually that is on the contrary. And I am presenting such a body, which is a legislative body, the National Assembly of Armenia. And it has the task of not only not simply publishing, but it has the problem of being informed and receiving information from different public sources. The purpose of my being here, of me being here, and the topic of the panel connected with cybersecurity, I was interested mostly in legislative issues around this topic, which we haven't yet touched, unlike the previous panel. But yeah, and what was discussed was useful for me. What can I add? In connection with the story, a couple of months ago, very, very accidentally in Facebook, I happened to see a discussion. And it was around these bad management bodies, and especially the bad parliamentarians have decided that they are going to limit the freedom of internet. And it was around the law connected with the games, with the lottery games, with the gambling. And then people who were concerned, who were experts, who were private organizations, who had also commercial interest in this. There was a call that please come around a round table and let's discuss our viewpoints. The result was that 2 weeks ago, with the second hearing, we adopted that law and all the concerns were just vanished, they evaporated. I simply want to tell you that these bad state bodies who are concealing information, very often the guarantee of their success or failure is that citizens and interest groups should change the way of communicating with them and would directly get in touch with them and make tangible suggestions. Because we are a parliamentarian country, and I will tell you now what I know. And it's natural that we are anticipating from the new parliament more, if I may say so, professional behavior, better quality decisions. And there are preconditions for that, but there are also numerous very serious problems, including institutional capacity, because we have inherited an institution which, by its definition, was supposed mainly to serve as an adopting organization of laws coming from the executive branch of the power. And so we should not only open the gates to that building, but metaphorically we should open the building for people who have something to say, who would know that direct connection is better rather than discussion in Facebook. Okay, I will address some positions that you have voiced. What I just remembered from things that you listed, you spoke about hackathon. This is the only good experience of cooperation between state and private sectors, and also for revealing the problems by the state, because one of the sponsors of that hackathon was one of those who, well, it took place in Mergelian, and that was a good experience of revealing these problems without much making noise, and Samuel Martirosyan will say separately. Okay, firstly, when we say that some kind of concept was published or strategy was published, who among you, people who are interested in cyber security, who has seen this concept published? Raise your hands. Published, that you have participated in. That's great. That's good. That's fantastic. 2 people have seen it. That's great answer in respect of the professional community, even if something was adopted, hasn't seen it published actually. Okay, let's consider the mechanisms of communication. That is that we all need. When I say about communication, we have beautiful platform that is called ISOC, and I'm almost sure Mr. Saryan, I am sure on your behalf, I want to promise people that you will help all of us in dissemination of those documents and those published things that people will provide us. I think it's in all of our interest. If something is published, then at least we could say that these and these things have been published, these and these places, and this time, at this and this time. And please be in contact, colleagues, so as these communication issues will be solved somehow. Secondly, when we say that search should be state, the problem is that only non-governmental organization can be called search. When we say about something which is going to be called something else, like cyber security center, cyber security restaurant, or whatever, search could be only non-governmental organization. It is written in the Charter of Carnegie Mellon that gives certification of CERT. And unfortunately, that's going to be something else. Yeah, with all due respect. When we speak of the publication of the incidents of cybersecurity, it is written at least in the legislation of USA and in standard ISO 127001. State certs should inform national certs that they had incidents. Or like, for example, Americans have published. Why this is done? So as people who have lost, who were damaged in the result of this incident, they would know that, like, for example, my social security number was stolen, so I should go apply and get a new social security card. This is a measure for protection of me as business owner, as a citizen, as an individual, so as I would take certain steps to protect myself. If we don't publish this information, that this data maybe was robbed, maybe was stolen, and I will not go and change my passport data, and don't go change my, I don't know how to call it, ID card, whatever, this social card, if I don't change my social card. The meaning of the publication is so as people who have bared losses or damages from this incident should take care to minimize the losses from this incident. And when we say that Marlborough of last year was broken, that was a very important information for me, because I needed to understand whom to warn, if I need to warn, and about what to warn. And I anticipate that the state is to take care of my interest in that context, because I, as a citizen, should understand, well, yes, everybody makes mistakes, everybody has difficulties, but if we openly speak about these issues, it means that qualified, literate citizens will be protected even more. Openness we need for protection, not just to look into dirty linen of somebody who doesn't want to show it. Well, whatever. I would like to speak of this difference. When you said that there are cyber crimes, you were speaking of cyber crimes, and I was speaking about cyber incidents. I know that hacking Marlborough was most probably cyber crime. I'm not lawyer. I don't know whether the procurator's office prosecutor has started a criminal case. For me, that was an incident. I don't care whether somebody will be caught, will be hacked, or will be executed, whatever. That's second, third, fifth question for me. For me, it's important that my data, which the state quite legally possesses and processes, what should I do with them if something happens? And last, about this law on lotteries, on lottery games. In two discussions, at least in the Facebook, I at least participated in that respect. The problem is that this law on lotteries preceded by the speeches of two deputies. One of them was Arman Hakopian, brother of Anna Hakopian. There was one more deputy, member of the parliament, who were speaking about the necessity of restricting the access to online casinos, which are against the legislation of acting against the legislation of the Republic of Armenia. The project said that these online casinos should comply with the law, which means that, well, quite reasonable requirements. That, for example, individuals under the age of 18 should not be able to have access, and restricting the access, this terminology, created the biggest problem, at least with me. I am very, very glad that this situation was solved in civilized way, and that these provisions didn't appear in the final law, that we can be proud with these, like for example with this hackathon, which I have seen as it was the coolest development that I've seen. And okay, let's finish and give the audience chance to ask questions. Yes, Hamazasp. The only thing I suggest is that it's really very good to have in public platforms, but it is very, in the course of these discussions, it's worth, I'm going to open a secret. The members of the parliament do not know everything, and they need information, and they need also to listen to opinions and suggestions from the public. Only in that context I was saying this. Now, in respect of cyber crime and cyber incident part, I have to be frank, that, well, it wasn't that detailed, but maybe, I said that maybe there are things that should be closed. When you say that the state bodies want to conceal it, there are things that are expedient to be revealed and not expedient to be revealed. What you said something about in connection of the April war of 2011, and that the cyber security deals with each commission of the National Assembly is responsible for their own spheres, and there is also the so-called controlling commission, which is dealing with a number of issues. And in connection with cybersecurity and cyber incidents, I will call simply you, please get in touch with the representatives of these commissions and start dialogue with them, because that is mutually beneficial, and that's the only way of doing things, because we can even have the best wishes in deciding things, and you can complain of our decisions, and we might not know even why do you complain. Now, in respect of publication of information about incidents, here we have to look at it from several aspects. If there are victims, and if the process has received a legal procedure, then it is published. But there is also the second issue, that those against whom these attacks have taken place or loss of data has taken, this person, the victim meaning, doesn't want to make it public because it damages their image. This is mainly about the public sector who are dealing with different types of data. These kind of incidents are out of the competence, no, how to say, not competence, but out of the access of the legal enforcement bodies, if there is no third party who says that because of this incident that has happened this and time and in this place, I have had these losses. Meaning, if there is an entity that has bared damages or losses, and if there is a legal kind of case about it, and there is also the third nuance, which is about the national security issues. From the national security point of view, is it necessary absolutely to announce it or not? Maybe it should be done a couple of days later. From the point of view of, demands or requirements of the national security. I highlighted this about CERT, saying that the same process that we have initiated with EKING, that we try to do, we don't call it CERT, and we don't even discuss yet what's going to be called. It should be called Monitoring Center, Center of Cybersecurity. It will be some state infrastructure center, monitoring center, around which then there will be sectoral CERTs. The development of private CERTs will only be in favor of the state, will useful for the state. But at the same time, the private CERT can't cover the state problems. The state should have its own CERT. I just conditionally call it CERT. It's not going to be called CERT. Some kind of cybersecurity center around which the rest will come forward, and this cooperation will be indeed useful. This, when I said CERT, and then I clarified myself that actually it's not called CERT. We were not using the name CERT. Now, about the other part, in connection with publication of information on incidents, I absolutely agree with you that if there is cyber incident that the publication of information about which will mitigate the further risks, meaning people who have had losses or damages because of this incident would know what to do and how to protect themselves further. I absolutely agree, yes, it should be published. If the publication of this information will give more positive processes rather than negative ones. That's why the state should do some assessment about these things. But as of this moment, I do not remember, frankly, any such kind of incident would have been in the publication of which would be in the interest of citizens. I don't remember this kind of incident amongst us not published. For example, the last year Mulberry incident, if I'm not mistaken, Sergeant Arsen will correct me, that incident took place indeed, but that was not about the leak of information. They had just published things on the web, but it was not that information was leaked. I want to outline one topic around which we had revealed difference in approaches, and this is the mandatory disclosure of security incidents. Mandatory disclosure of incidents. In the United States, there is a practice that each company that is trading at the exchange must inform public about the incidents of security. Any financial organization that has license on doing financial and banking activities in the United States, despite of its publicity, must publish information about incidents. Any medical institution that is functioning on the territory of the United States must publish information about incidents. Any organization that is dealing with processing of personal data must publish information about incidents. The goal of these initiatives is that not just somebody who is interested in preserving their image, yes, whether this would be good or not if I publish this to my image. So regardless of this, they would publish it. And I want to bring an example. If I'm not mistaken, in 2016, there was a problem with one of Armenian banks, which was damaged because of the attack of the group Carbonac. And they cashed out 400 something thousand dollars from this bank and went away. The effect of hack was that they put APT in the bank, and that was kind of very progressive virus, and received control over the machine tellers. And the criminals got access to the credit cards and they could see at least 3/4 of the full magnetic cards. That information was not published, and there was a criminal case on this information. The criminal case didn't bring to anything but information. What kind of bank was it? How the hacking took place? What kind of data were taken away? All of this information was not published. Then, yes. People saw that some individuals are named public enemies, but they didn't know why. And when they say that, who's going to decide? How am I going to make decisions to use this card or not? Who's going to pay for the rearrangement of my credit card? And if something like that happened, it means that this bank has bad security system, and me as a citizen, as a customer, as client, doesn't matter whom, I must know. Summing up, propping up what we have in this discussion, as far as I understand, we have full agreement on the definition of definitions, on the separation of definitions of cyber incident, cyber security, information security. Yes, I mean us here, participants of the panel session, that information about state concepts and all the other documents that are developed, processed by the state, should be public, and whatever is published, we should know about it. Whatever is to be published is to be published, or whatever is to be implemented publicly. Yeah. And you have to speak into the microphone. Yes, I will find you in Facebook and remind you about this statement. We have disagreements and demands for additional discussion, what we call publication of incidents of information security. We have different approach to this issue. And Grishajan, please fix this as the question which needs public discussion, be it in the framework of ISOC or any other platforms, and ISOC will decide on which platforms. Colleagues, I want to have 3 questions from the audience and go forward. And actually it's 6 o'clock, people, 6 o'clock. Yeah, Armenian, please. Okay. In respect of these incidents and information freedom, we have to take into account that if there has been an incident, then the criminal case has been started and the investigation is started, and there comes forward this pre-investigation secrecy, which means that the investigating body is not authorized to give information. They have to decide whether this information is pre-investigative secrecy or not. What I say is that there are different opinions. I have read in media about the bank, but in the beginning phase, this same thing, that this thing, well, you have to consider the question of, as I said once, expediency to publish the pre-investigation secrets or not. Okay, let's give chance to ask questions. Into the microphone, please. Question. I have no access to the question. Okay. Information security and cyber security. Yes, you made this differentiation. If I understood you right, these are kind of equal things, but different things. Separately, information security and cyber security. You said that the panel had come to agreement. I wanted, this issue was discussed on internet forums And I will just repeat in brief, that's not my personal opinion, but I want to express my opinion. My first major was cybernetics. Pay attention to the preliminary terms and, sorry, the concept of information, the definition of Shannon, etc., is some data that have certain value. And they could be hunted, and they should be protected, etc. And there is some element that not only the data, but means with which they are transferred. So not only the data could be stored, but also the infrastructure could be broken. And now about cyber security. And there is this subroot cyber, some kind of governing system. Any complicated system conditionally speaking is hardware and software. Please pay attention that these are not equal concepts. Actually, cyber security already includes information security as well. No need to make such separation. What do I want to say? The first definition was taken from the standard ISO 27301, and the second is taken from ISO 12730,000. You have to apply to the International Organization of Standardization, to which I actually have no connection, but I have to accept them as something absolutely true. These have been absolute copy-pastes. Last question, Ruben. Yes, last question. It's question to ISO standard, not to me. Okay, I take the freedom to say that this is the last question because we're out of time today. Ruben, this definition of information security is contradicting to that definition of information security that we have in our concept of 2016. That is to say, the state of protectedness of the citizen, state and society in our official Armenian document is fixed like that. That definition which exists, that is about, of course, the content as well. Of course it is about the content. The question, can we say that certs, or whatever certs, the centers of reaction, have to somehow react to content? Never. Nope. Here we should put very strict segregation. Let's make this separation. When we speak about information security, we say that the context of that definition that I brought, it was taken from the standard on ISMS, information system, security management system, whatever. And when we speak about information security in the context of enterprises, organizations, etc., we understand the following thing, that we have information which is kind of separated as valuable and it is to be protected this way or that way. That's what this standard is about. The standard ISO 27001, this is the umbrella standard, and the others are its derivatives. This standard has nothing to do with psychological, propagandistic, median, and other aspects of information. That standard is busy only protecting information, which is this way or that way. Look, we need to provide confidentiality, wholeness, completeness, and accessibility of this information. Authenticity, accountability, non-repudiation, reliability. And in any case, we have to understand that this has nothing to do with the content, has no connection with the content. And if our concept, or whatever you call it, is contradicting the standard of ISO, then I can say only one thing. I am sorry for that concept. That's the only thing I'd like to say about it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was an honor to tell about something to you. That was an honor to work with you. Thank you very much and all the best.